Hey, it's time for Driven by Design, the only show that shows you the future of automotive design with that driven designer himself, Bryan Thompson. Hey, Bryan.
Hey!
Boy,
I'm in a mood today.
You got some coffee in you today.
Yeah, in fact, I had two. Actually, I get these little ones from Phil's, the mojito one, and they kind of buzz me up.
Okay.
So I'm on today.
Are they sponsoring the show now?
You know what? Maybe they should be. Let's talk to them later.
Drink at Phil's.
Exactly. Well, you have exceeded my expectations, my friend here. You have brought in a childhood hero of mine here. I may not have known the name, but I certainly knew the brand. You got in somebody who once worked with my childhood toys that I still have preciously saved 60 years later. Hot Wheels and Matchbox.
Hot Wheels and Matchbox. Yeah, this is a real treat today. Felix Holst is here with me, and Felix and I met a couple times in our career. We seem to keep meeting over and over again. We met right after I left Nissan. I was designing a car for a man named Tom Matano, who was former head of Mazda, and we created this little car. And then, as it got close to production, we decided we need a Hot Wheels made of this thing. And so we went to Hot Wheels, and Felix was there, and we hit it off. And that he got to see this great car. Of course,
what's that conversation like? You just got to give us a little back. So you just call them up out of the blue and say, "Hey, we're with Mazda, and we think you should make this car." And do they go, "Oh boy," or do they go, "No, we got enough of those"?
What's your recollection of that interaction?
I tell you, it was at a time. It was at a time with the brand where my marketing partner Simon and I were looking to the future and like what's going to happen in this culture that we represent. And around that time, and I forget who it was. Maybe it was Tom.
It might have been Tom
who actually made the introduction to Hot Wheels and put the proposal forward that you had a very, very interesting car.
See there.
All right, time over. See you later.
That's it.
That was it.
That's done. You had
was
a very
the thought
interesting...
police saying, "All right, enough of this right here." Okay.
That was the boring police.
No.
They were like, "We've got a very interesting proposition. Would you like to have a look at this car? It's going to be, it was, I can't remember what the idea was. There was some Apple tie-in with it and all sorts of stuff." And so we were like, "Yeah, of course, this is exactly the kind of thing we're looking for." And you guys rolled in with the car.
Yeah, it was a real car.
We put it in the gallery and we stood around and looked at it. You demonstrated it, and and then we walked away and said, "Well, if they pull it off,
if they make it, we'll make it.
Maybe we can do." And I think the discussion was, it's actually, this is very relevant to later on in this conversation.
It will be.
I think the conversation was around customization, like dealer customization, like could Hot Wheels provide wraps or graphics, or was there a sticker pack that you could get, or what would we do to make this very, very simple car appeal to the youth?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring in you, Felix, because your background with, I want to talk to you about two main things. Your background with Hot Wheels and Matchbox today, and then also what you're doing now, which is really, really cool about the future of automotive design and where manufacturing is going. So I think that, that was a little foreshadowing of what was coming in the car industry, this idea of customizing or personalizing a vehicle. But of course, like many startups, that vehicle did not come to fruition, and we moved on, and then we met again on the set of a TV show called Motor City Masters, where he was a judge, I was a contestant, and then we saw each other across the room, and I was like, "Wait a minute, I'm not supposed to know you."
Oh, the fix was in. Yeah, the contestant knew the judge. Yeah, right.
I like to call it the TV show that was a worldwide TV show that no one watched, but also never stops airing. So I keep getting now it's like in Thailand they're airing it, and I've been dubbed in all these different languages, and I get all these Facebook friend requests from other sides of the world. But anyway, enough about me. Let's talk more about me. No, let's talk about you, Felix. Tell me, okay, so I think that Hot Wheels is dear to everybody's heart. Whether you're a car person or not, you've always had little toy Matchboxes and Hot Wheels. And I'd love for you to talk about what is it. First of all, tell me the difference between Hot Wheels and Matchbox, because they're so similar.
So there's a historical difference. Matchbox goes all the way back to the early 50s. And it was all about replication and using then fairly new techniques in die casting to make small toys for kids, right? And the original Matchbox was literally a tiny little road roller that fit in a Matchbox because the founder's child could take one toy to school in 1952, I guess, as long as it fit in a Matchbox. And so he ran a die casting factory, and so he made a little steam engine or a road roller or something that fit in a Matchbox. And of course, when her friends saw it, everybody wanted one.
Oh.
And so Matchbox was born.
That's how it started.
So it was born out of tiny replicas of vehicles for kids. And of course, at that point, there was nothing more exciting than seeing a a milk delivery truck or a very austere British car driving down the road, because post-war England, you didn't see many cars, and so it went from strength to strength and strength and became a huge company.
And I think that's an important thing to note here, that Matchbox was always, to me, about proportion. They got the proportions of the car correct. As a little budding car designer, I could notice that Matchbox were different from Hot Wheels because they really looked like the cars, whereas Hot Wheels, now you tell me a bit about were different.
Yeah, so I mean, fast forward to the late 60s, and of course, California. Not just Californian hot rod culture, but hot rod culture had been in full effect for nearly 20 years in the US. And Matchbox was still the toy car brand. And, of course, Elliot Handler at Mattel was always looking for new innovation. Barbie had come up through the 50s and had taken the world by storm. And one of his engineers had come up with these kind of wire axles in a very simple rig that rolled across the table really quickly. And Matchbox cars had these steel pin axles. They were literally like nails with a couple of little tiny plastic wheels on them. And so while they did roll, they didn't roll well. And Elliot was looking for how do I take advantage of this new kind of performance chassis that I've developed. And he looked out into the parking lot.
A performance chassis for a 1-inch car, a 2-inch car, yeah.
Hence, Hot Wheels.
I mean, you take it for granted now, but at the time, there was no toy on the market from that perspective that was genuinely fast. When you roll an original red line and you feel the sprung axles.
And for people who don't know, a red line are the original Hot Wheels with the red line on the wheel.
Yeah, right. The early few years, the red line, and they achieved it with I think it was like a Delrin bearing in the wheels.
Right.
And then it had these wire axles, super low friction, and then also this very, very softly sprung wire suspension that was in the chassis. And so all of that meant these things, they almost felt like they were gliding on air, and they were very, very quick.
Hence the world Hot Wheels, because they were hot and they were fast, the performance aspect. Yes, go ahead, Paul.
Can I just throw in my own personal perspective? I'm in my mid-60s now here, so I lived this moment. And I grew up in car culture, as I've said here. Everybody's dad in Detroit worked for a car company. They're all execs, and we all wanted to collect the toys that Daddy made and sold. And then Hot Wheels came along, and it blew our mind. It made my dad crazy because they didn't look like anything he sold. They looked like Ed Roth and Big Daddy Roth and all the Batmobile kind of cars that they were making, out here in California. George Barris,
yes,
yeah, exactly.
And that's a key part of Hot Wheels, is that as Matchbox was sort of replicating, it seems like Hot Wheels had a more creative side to them. What you just say they would hasn't it always been part of Hot Wheels DNA to exaggerate something on the car?
So Hot Wheels was born out of hot rod culture. It was not born out of staid replication from day one. And I used to know this off the top of my head, but there was the kind of 5 tenets of Hot Wheels, which was big and little wheels, chrome exhausts, blown motors, spectroflame paint.
Blown motors, all these things sticking up like they're as big as the whole car itself. This
impossible to see around.
And to most people in the 50s and around at that time and around the world, it was a fantasy play, but the reality was that Elliot Handler had been out on the street and trying to find what's the hook, and he was surrounded by candy paint jobs in California on hot rods. And in fact, Harry Bradley, who was the first Hot Wheels designer, who was a GM designer and had done time at Chrysler, and was hired by Elliot to come and be the designer for his new toy line. Harry had a fantasy that he wanted everything was going to be very, very futuristic car design. It was all going to be very sleek forms, but he had at the time a custom El Camino pickup, and it was chopped, and it had red line tires, and it had crazy paint, and it had some asymmetry in it, and I think it had some velocity stacks through the hood. And that might have been the car evolved. When you look into it, the car evolved over decades. But he pulled into the driveway, and Elliot Handler, the founder of Mattel, legend has it that he stood there and he was having a discussion about the styling direction for Hot Wheels, and he turned around and said, "Now them's some Hot Wheels."
No,
and so
got
it was
the
born.
name and the brand.
And Harry didn't stay with the company long because he still, I believe, he still wanted to really take car design seriously and push the boundaries of car design at the time. But he did pen certainly the first year, the original 16. Possibly.
So the original, the original offering was 16 cars,
16
with
cars.
the red lines.
Yeah,
Okay,
and,
I didn't know that.
The majority of them were actually licensed cars.
Real cars.
There was definitely at least one Ed Roth bubble top.
Yeah.
I would get it wrong if I tell you which one it was. It wasn't Mysterion. It was.
There were so many.
It might have been Beatnik Bandit. I can't remember.
But I just want to reiterate for those who don't know this and didn't live through that. When they came out, it was revolutionary. Not because just the design, which was everything bigger and huge. And maybe this is an inappropriate thing to say, but it's sort of the same thing happened with comic books. We went from these very staid Batman, Superman comics to these explosive Marvel comics where the superheroes had giant muscles and the women had giant breasts, and suddenly the cars had giant engines and everything was just expanded and exploded.
I grew up wanting to be those guys. I remember. Those were my influences.
The cars or the superheroes?
Both. I wanted to turn myself into a superhero car.
Yeah, right. But they went fast, whereas I wasn't polishing and like I still do with my little Matchboxes. Yeah. I was racing them on these little plastic tracks, and they just went like a bat out of hell.
They were so... Well, that brings me to my next question, which is, what is your favorite Hot Wheels? Or do you have one?
Oh, I can answer that. I can. I have a... I still have my original Hot Wheels car. The first Hot Wheels car I ever got, which I would have received it around 1975, which would have been, I would have been about 3 years old. The car itself is an original 68 Redline Hot Wheels car. I got it from one of my grandmother's friends who had been on vacation to America and had brought this back for her kid, and then it was passed on to me. And I mean, like, God, in the early 70s in the north of England, someone who'd been to America was a very rare thing.
Yeah.
And so I treasured this car, and it was a Firebird convertible.
Oh, wow. With the interior.
It's a Spectraflame red Firebird convertible.
I can picture it. Yeah.
With it's got kind of zoomy headers kicking out from behind the front wheels. It's obviously an original Redline. It has an opening hood.
And you still have it.
And so the story is, it's a great story, actually. So, yes, that was my original Hot Wheels car, and it inspired me. It was before Hot Wheels was actually on the pegs in the UK.
Right.
Later on, I discovered Hot Wheels on the pegs.
I love when you say on the pegs. You mean in the stores, hanging on the pegs in the drugstores.
and I was a weird kid, Northeast England, and I was into hot rods from a very early age. And certainly this car was a big part of that. And so I always looked after that car, and I wanted to be a car designer from a very early age, and so all the way through college, my plan was to be a car designer. And I finished my degree in industrial design at Northumbria University, same university that Jonathan Ives. Jonathan Ives graduated the fall after he graduated. I started at Northumbria. Very, very, very well established and highly regarded industrial design school. Yes, and so I wanted to.
Who is Jonathan Ives? I'm sorry.
Jonathan Ives is head of design for a rather small company called Apple. So
he did a few little things we all own.
So I came out of it with a very strong industrial design degree, and then I went on. I was going to go to the RCA to do car design, and I stumbled into a 6-month lowly temp position for Hot Wheels UK.
Oh,
and
that's where it all started.
At that point, I had to go, oh my God, is Hot Wheels still around?
Yeah,
I just hadn't thought about it. You just don't, right?
You forget.
And
especially growing up in the UK, where it would have been more Matchbox in the UK than because that's a British brand, and we had Hot Wheels because it's American.
Yeah. And so I immediately went back to I had a shoebox full of the cars that had survived from my childhood, and of course the red Hot Wheels Redline.
Was still in there.
Was still in there.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
So. Then that was the kickoff for a 20-year, give or take some time off for bad behavior in a rock and roll band.
Which is its own podcast, by the way.
That was the start of a 20-year career at Hot Wheels, which resulted in me being head of creative for the Wheels division, vice president of design for not just product, but packaging, entertainment, all this stuff. And so the irony of this is that I think it was the Christmas after I'd resigned from the end of my 20-year tenure with Mattel. I was at home for Christmas with my 2-year-old daughter at my mother's house, and there was my family, and then there was my brother with his 2 daughters who were a little bit older than mine, and I just imagined that car was lost
long
forever,
gone.
long
Of course,
gone.
yeah. How could it be there?
And there was a box of like Duplo, like the Lego bricks for toddlers, and my daughter Vespa was wanting for something to play with at Grandma's house, and so I tipped this box out that my brother's kids had been playing with for 7 or 8 years, and tipped it all on the floor to stop playing with it. And what was in the bottom of that box? But my red line Hot Wheels.
No, all these years have been waiting for you.
Still with straight axles.
Yeah,
My brother's kids had been playing with it at Grandma's house.
They never smashed
and they had never. Thank God for girls. Really,
Yeah.
because
well,
I can guarantee that if he'd had sons, it would have been hit with a hammer by then.
Yeah,
but
you had to
because
lower
that's what
them.
I would have done.
That was how
when
you
I was
lower
that
them.
age.
You get them with a hammer till the wheels break.
Yeah, and so the car now, the car is technically my daughter's now.
Yeah.
But that car is sitting on my desk in my office. At
Oh, it
home.
is? Oh, we should have a photo. We should.
I got to interrupt and just
go ahead.
add one other personal observation. What is it about those toys? And it must give you special pleasure to see that these toys survive. But what was it about them that 40, 50, 60 years later, 20 years later, people still say them? Brian says he still have his. I have my Matchbox and Hot Wheels that go back to the late 50s and early 60s. The guy that was just in here before said, when we introduced you to him, he's like, I still have my Hot Wheels. What is... I can't tell you the millions of other toys I've forgotten about and given away or thrown away or broken. What is about that they survive? And how does that make you feel to see something that you had a hand in last that long?
God, there's a very long and deep answer to that, which goes on and on and on and on. But
you got 2 minutes.
Firstly, so they generally. I think you can look at the past 60 years of the auto industry as the golden years of the auto industry. I mean, you can look beyond that. You can say that the 40s and the 50s in America, 50s certainly was the golden era. But
it's changing so fast now.
It's changing so fast. But there's 3 generations of 3 generations have grown up with Hot Wheels, right? Grandparents played with Hot Wheels cars. A generation of fathers played with Hot Wheels cars, and now there's a generation of sons played. So I would say 3, maybe 4 generations have grown up with Hot Wheels as a favorite.
Connecting to the car,
and through let's just keep it at 3 generations. Through those 3 generations, the car and its place in culture has evolved to mean different things, but has been very, very important to many, many different sides of society as a status symbol, as a utility vehicle, as a means of escape, and a representation of the freedom of the open road, right? And we'll get onto, I'm sure we'll get onto in a moment, how the auto industry is now changing.
For sure. This is a great segue because this whole show is about connection and design. And I think that as we get into what you're doing now, I'd really like to talk about that connection that is changing in cars. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is that these little toys connect to the heart of multi-generations in a way that other toys never did.
Yeah, and I would say slightly different for each of those generations, but the aspirational quality of, like, you think back to that original lineup that came out in '68. There wasn't one hot-blooded male or female at the time who couldn't look at one of those cars with its Spectraflame candy apple paint and what it symbolized, and certainly the Californian dream of the endless summer, wind in the hair, high performance,
Drive open road.
That was. It was all about inspiration.
Yeah,
and in fact, aspiration.
For
aspiration
$1, you get a
and
piece
inspiration.
Of that dream.
Yes, and that stayed with the brand for 50 years. They've just celebrated their 50th anniversary.
So where is it going? That's where I know you guys want to go here in our last 10 minutes here. Where is it going? And will there be a Hot Wheel of a little Uber someday?
Well, I think let's help transition that where it's going with what Felix is doing. One quick thing I want to do right before we leave Hot Wheels and Matchbox is just the thing that always I noticed about the 2 brands is that Hot Wheels really appealed to somebody who wanted to change the proportions, do very creative things. Whereas as a budding car designer, my favorite car was the Mercury Country Squire station wagon, Mercury Cougar station wagon, because it looked like the car that Bosley had from Charlie's Angels, and it respected the proportions. So this little nerd, while all my friends were having the hot rods, I wanted the one that looked like Mom's station wagon, because you just didn't see that in the toy industry.
Was that the one with the two dogs in the back?
Yes. Yeah. Oh God, it was amazing.
I believe it was an Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, but I could be wrong. It might have been a Mercury station wagon, actually.
There was two. There were two wagons, but the Mercury had the swoopy welt line, and they got it exact. And I'll just say, as we go into what you're doing now, my biggest honor in life ever, I think for any kid, is to have a Hot Wheels of a car you made. And last year, Matchbox made a Matchbox of the Nissan NV van, which was the last car I worked on and designed at Nissan. And that, to see my nephew play with a car that I designed. I know it's a van and it's a box, but it's just it's so surreal. And then he's like, "Wait, you designed this?" And I was like, "I designed the one out there." It's so much more rewarding than any car I've ever designed that's actually on the road. The toy is the thing.
Yeah. The way that in my career there, I met a lot of heroes and a lot of very impressive people in the auto industry, right? Whether they're designers, whether they're drivers, athletes, car designers. Every one of them below a certain age were like, "Look, man, you can't believe how inspirational because of this brand or these brands. I do what I do because of these brands."
Exactly. Oh yeah, it inspired me to be a car
designer. It's a badge of honor, right? To actually have one of your designs
canonized
in the line.
Yeah.
Canonized. Yeah.
It's more better. It's way better than the car itself. With that said, so now that Hot Wheels and Matchbox are in your tiny little rearview mirror. You tell us what you're doing now, because what you're doing now is you could have a whole podcast about it. It's really about the future of automotive design and manufacturing. Give us a little snippet of what it is you're doing now.
So the clever segue is that in my time, that part of my life, it was all about dreams and aspiration. It was about representing and storytelling. And basically looking at bringing things to life for kids, bringing the notion of if a kid, if this is how a kid imagines a story when he's playing with a Hot Wheels car, then how do we continue that story? How do we bring that to life? And then some of the stuff I did with my now partner towards the end of my tenure there, where we brought Hot Wheels to life. We built some full-size cars and tracks, and we set 3 world records with these crazy stunts. And we looked at it and we were like, why shouldn't a kid with a dream be able to build his own car easily?
That's so cool.
We fell into the world of I left Mattel and started hanging out in Silicon Valley and San Francisco and looking at the future of design and manufacturing. And this is really going back 6 years now. And I saw this convergence of technologies, and maybe it was because Mouse is a movie director, I'm a toy designer, to put it in kind of real blunt terms.
Tell us what it's called first, so people.
So my company is called Hackrod.
It's called Hackrod.
Hackrod.
And what? And what is it? What would you say it does?
We are focused on democratizing. Excuse me. We are focused on democratizing design and manufacturing.
Okay, so that's what I want to get into, because that is so cool. Basically taking what is normally a giant industry with so many investments and bringing it to something that everybody could do, right?
Yeah.
And so they were inspired by, to get back to your story, you were inspired by.
So we looked around us and we saw everything from the advances that were being made in industrial 3D printing, right? So we've used 3D printing for 15, 20 years in my old world, but it was always just for resin prototypes. Suddenly, you can manufacture with 3D printing. Virtual reality, in terms of suddenly you can have a photo-real experience and look at something that doesn't exist as though it's a real full-size thing. So you can look at a car that is nothing more than a digital file and stand there looking at a real car and go, I can actually do a surface review on this.
Yeah, I don't like it when they put it in the dark neighborhood world, because when you're in there, it's very scary, and I think it affects how you react to the car. Because, you feel like there's somebody going to come kill you in the background. But the virtual reality world is so real that it affects your.
So I got to stop and ask you a question. You're saying right now today it is like the Star Trek Enterprise. And you have a holodeck almost.
When you're doing car design reviews, you can
go into a room and you can walk around and look at it from different perspectives.
Yeah, and the worlds that you pick to put the vehicle in affect your perception of the design. If you put it in a sunny world, you feel good. If you put it on a dark street, it's scary. So I always say, don't give me the dark street world, because I want my design well reviewed.
Wow. Give me Palm Springs.
Give me Palm Springs.
I don't want a back street in Berlin.
I get in there and I'm like, who's back there? Freddy Krueger? It's freaking me out.
So your company does what though? I'm still lost.
So we are developing a digital platform that ties all this stuff together, right? So it's It's VR enabled. It's not VR exclusive. You can use it on a desktop, but it's VR enabled, and it links it links the ability to automatically bring in manufacturing data, manufacturing CAD, into a light environment that is consumer friendly. Think about it like a video game. You can manipulate heavy manufacturing CAD as easily as though you're playing a video game. You can. Right now, we're working on just configuration, so you can build a custom motorcycle from off-the-shelf parts that are all pre-engineered.
So you can so it allows you to sort of design your own vehicle, but the kick, if I understand correctly, is that you can actually make it.
Then you can kick it out to manufacturing.
Oh,
and that's where
that's so cool.
So you can grow the car in your own home, like using a 3D compositing. I forget what they call it, but it actually
3D printing.
Aggregating. You take this goop and this powder, and it suddenly aggregates and turns it into a real life example.
That's the long term vision.
Yeah.
Short term vision is there are bureaus popping up all around the world that can 3D print finished parts.
Right.
And we're starting with we've got some high concept stuff with cars, but we're starting with motorcycles because at the moment the price value is right there for a set of custom printed fenders and a gas tank for a custom motorcycle, which means that you're into the world of on-demand manufacturing. There's no MOQs. You can offer the consumer hundreds or thousands of individual like motorcycle gas tanks, each one of them different. And it's not based on like I've got to make sure that I sell 20,000 of this before I break even, because it's printed on demand.
Yeah, it changes the business model from which has been the car industry standard for so long of making a little bit of money on a lot of cars into being able to make a niche or one-off manufacturing, and that becomes profitable. Yeah, it's really exciting. I mean, I've been following it, since for years, as you developed it, and it's just such a cool idea to like know that the future of car design is changing from being something that you actually have to go to school for and get a degree and do all this things, but that anybody can sort of be guided and affected, almost like how the music industry allows you to push and pull sounds and play with stuff.
That's a perfect analogy. It's I was in a serious band for about 5 years, and then I witnessed the compression of that industry through things like iTunes and then GarageBand, and suddenly, with no training at all, you could make music just by playing a game. You could drag and drop things. All the hard work's done for you, and you can just be creative, regardless of your background. And so that is inspiration for, all right, well, what's next? The movie industry got compressed with digital cameras, GoPro, editing suites that were accessible on anybody's laptop. So suddenly anybody can make a movie, right? Well, for me, next, industrial design.
Absolutely.
Anybody can be an industrial designer.
And then you allow people to express their creativity in ways they never could have, which leads a whole nother topic of like what are we going to see? Everybody always says the same things. Cars always look the same today. Now, when they were in the olden days, they looked different. Today they look the same, and I always say just wait to see what's coming, because the amount of creativity coming and that's going to be in our world is phenomenal.
And especially when you combine that with electric platforms, so the packaging of a car changes completely. Autonomous systems are also going to bring down the safety requirements, so the packaging changes again, and you can do pretty crazy stuff if you're not restricted by pedestrian safety, traditional combustion engine packaging, crumple zones, etc.
Can I make a suggestion here, since we're running up against the clock here? I'm wondering if we could do a part 2 of this.
Oh yeah, we need to do, because we still could spend a whole thing about, because one of the things I wanted to touch on was that connection that people have to the Hot Wheels toys that is sort of the world sort of worries about being lost now, or people worry about with the autonomous
cars. That's what I asked. If you got an Uber, am I going to have my little kid going to want, my grandson going to want a little toy Uber that he drives around? So he can have the same connection that I did to that little fantasized or real car.
But maybe this is a good place for you to talk about the connection that people can have to something that they make themselves.
But that's absolutely it, right? I think that it's more likely that a company like Hot Wheels will start informing design, not even directly, but the idea that, do I want to put a devil face on the front of my little plastic box? Then I'm going to print a devil face. Do I want to have my favorite emoji? Do I want my favorite cartoon character? Do I want... And suddenly you get into this whimsy. That the other thing that Hot Wheels always had was whimsy.
Right.
Didn't take itself seriously. And in fact, some of the most popular models we ever did was there was like a hot rod lavatory. And there was a shark car. And there was
humorous.
And so why not?
Minecraft cars.
It gets a little bit like Richard Scary.
But
like do you want to drive a banana car? You can drive a banana car. 3D printed on a standard platform, and you can drive a banana car.
What I love as a designer, everything in me goes, cringe because I know it's got to be tasteful. But what I love about it is that it just blows that away and be like, what is taste? It can be whatever you want it to be.
Whatever it is. Everybody wants something different, and I think that the decades of chin stroking, Paul Smith
cape wearing,
like chin stroking, like I'm
guilty.
Like really, dude, because your car looks like crap.
Right, exactly. Oh yeah. Well, I think that's a great. As we get kind of wrapping up here, I want to make sure that people can connect with you. What I love about this segment, it was talking about the connection to cars, from the toys to this autonomous world to where it's going to go in the future. Felix, how do people find you if they're curious about this? They want to hear more about it.
Generally, hanging out in a bar on Venice Beach.
It's true, actually.
You can. I mean, I don't. I'm not one for pseudonyms. Like, you can find me on social media as Felix Holst.
Okay.
At Felix Holst.
And let's spell that.
That's FELIXHOLST.
Okay.
You're lucky you got a cool name.
Yeah. Or you can visit Hackrod. If you go to the website, there's an info at. If you want to send me an email, if it's well, for whatever reason, but you can get me through info@hackrod.com.
Okay. Well, listen, this is so cool. I definitely want to do a part 2 if you have time in the future.
Do we wait for part 2 for the favorite designer? I've been thinking about this for the past half hour. You asked me that question.
Do we have a little bit of time? Let's do it. Who is your favorite designer?
I got 2.
Okay.
Raymond Loewy.
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, Raymond Loewy, of course, people that don't know, he created the Shell logo. He was the first industrial designer, created the Greyhound logo and the, what car?
The Studebakers.
Yeah,
a lot of
Avanti.
Studebakers, the Avanti, and many before that.
That's the one I knew from Avanti.
And then I think Giugiaro is I can't. There's no one greater in my mind.
DeLorean, Volkswagen First Golf. Yeah. I mean, Isuzu Impulse, just to name the highlights. So many cars.
Yeah.
Giugiaro is. We could have a whole segment about Giugiaro.
Yeah. Oh, multiple segments.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Felix. This has been a treat.
All right, this has been
such a treat.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Driven by design by the people who are driving it right now, right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OCTalkRadio.net.